once you know your investor DNA, you know what's the right strategy for you. And we utilize the passive income matrix to determine that. That's just so critical as an investor. If I had that before investing in short-term rentals, I might not have had a tragedy where it sounds like you guys had some success.
Okay, Stallion, tell me why short-term rentals. You got to have the right vehicle for the right job. Let me tell you what I mean. There was a time when I was at the beach. It was actually this last year, and we wanted to rent a golf cart, but it was February. Now, I don't normally go to the beach in February, but we had a golf cart available to us. And so we started to drive down we're going to the street to go to this little shop, and it was freezing. And what I mean, I eventually got to the location, but I was freezing. I was uncomfortable. It was not the most efficient means. There's cars kind of going around us and everything like this. This was not the right vehicle for the right job. And when it comes to us learning about getting to financial freedom, you need the right vehicle. You have the system. You've already set up your passive income operating system. If you haven't, you have an opportunity. But once you have that in place, now you need the right financial freedom, passive income vehicle. And if short-term rental is something you've been considering, you need to listen up, because you're either going to be really confident after this interview, or you're going to say, maybe I should move on to something else because it's something I heard from one of these guys who's been there and done that I didn't consider.
All right. What was your favorite, or maybe not favorite, what's a line you remember from the original Top Gun?
I'm the worst.
I have a need for speed. Okay, if you're like me, you have a need for speed, and the traditional way of investing in real estate is way too slow. Short-term rental, though, is the gas pedal. It literally is the rocket booster that you and I use to build over 25 short-term rentals in a less than 18-month period of time, and it definitely connected with our profile way better than the other strategy.
If you've listened to our show for any length of time, you've heard us talk about infinite banking and how we were able to use that concept to create over $50,000 a month in passive income. But it's just not that easy to figure out, how does this all connect into my own personal system?
Stallion, that's why we created the passive income operating system, bro. It shows you how to turn active income into passive income. It makes all the steps come together. If you would like to get access to it as a podcast listener, we've never given this away in public before, go to what'swhatwallstreet.com/PIOS.
All right, let me come around the table here. Jonathan, Dave, tell me, why should we be invested in short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals represents an opportunity. I think real estate is one of the best ways possible to build long-term wealth. And so with short-term rentals, you get this opportunity to build long-term wealth through real estate, but then you also have the opportunity, especially as a self-manager, there's all sorts of strategies we'll talk about, but if you're self-managing a property that you own, now you're running a hospitality business. So you've got long-term net worth potential with real estate combined with short-term current cash flow with this business that you own and run. So it's an excellent opportunity for the right person if it's something for you. Yeah.
Well, I know we're going to talk about the pros and the cons and the different strategies, and I hear some pros and cons of what you just said. I will come back to that. But before we do, Ben, tell us, short-term rental, why?
Yeah, so the title of our podcast today is, Are Short-Term Rentals Worth It? And the short answer is, it depends. I think we have to say that on every podcast, but it truly does depend. For me, I jumped into short-term rentals before knowing my investor DNA. And if you haven't taken that, it's in the Wealth Without Wall Street community. I highly encourage you to access it if you haven't done it yet. But once you know your investor DNA, you know what's the right strategy for you. And we utilize the passive income matrix to determine that. That's just so critical as an investor. If I had that before investing in short-term rentals, I might not have had a tragedy where it sounds like you guys had some success.
No, that's so good. All right, so let's break down some pros of this. Tell me, in your opinion, Stallion, what is a pro to investing in the short-term rental market?
I would say you kind of said it the best. I think there's a way to get, I'm going to hand that out very rarely, okay? But in this case, using short-term rentals is probably, if you're buying right, if you're in the right location, and all these, there's a lot of variables behind it. So don't hear me like giving a blanket advice of any way. But if you can do that properly, it is by far the most profitable way to buy real estate, because you're literally charging the highest amount per the time frame that people are renting it. And so you're able to outrun the debt service and all the expenses and things of that nature. So I think it has the fastest way to create the most cash flow.
Would you say it has a higher ceiling, and almost even not a ceiling to its income potential in a given month?
Yes.
Because a long-term rental is going to give you a ceiling, right? There's a fixed amount that you can rent it for. A midterm rental a little higher than that, short-term rental a little higher than that. Now, it doesn't guarantee it. We'll come back to that, but I think that's a good point there. Ben, what's a pro in your eyes of the short-term rental space?
Yeah, so definitely a pro. My investor DNA, my profile, I'm an I. And so why short-term rentals are a pro for an I is because it's a people business. I get to connect with people. There's new and cool technologies that keep evolving for this business. Plus, it's a selling point for all of us, because depending on your market, you can have some exceptional returns, as Joey was pointing out. In my particular situation, I chose a done-for-you model, meaning I invested with operators that were already doing this. And so that gave me a couple of short-term rentals. And one big pro to that is that in that model, it required very little influence from me, at least initially. In the beginning, I understood the business plan because the done-for-you service was doing it for me, and they had a team of people that allowed me to be hands-off. As a busy family man, as a military service member, I was time poor at the time, and I just needed a business to be hands-off. So for the short-term rental done-for-you model, I think that's a huge pro for some folks.
Well, and I think in there, it's like so many of us thought about short-term rental as I have to do it.
Right.
But you just shared that there's options of other people doing it for you. I do think there's pros, and that exists in lots of different real estate deals out there. Jonathan, tell us some pros to the short-term rental space in your opinion.
Some pros in my mind, and it goes back exactly to what Ben just said. It depends. A pro for me might not be a pro for you. I went from scratching out a living in long-term rentals, and I'm looking at trying my best, absolute best, to get $200 a month, $300 a month per door, and certainly I'm moving the needle on my long-term wealth with my long-term rental portfolio. But short-term rentals, now I can take ownership of, again, a hospitality business through technology. Through technology, now those people that you were calling in Tennessee to, hey, I'm going to book a place, and they're taking the calls, placing you somewhere, they were getting exorbitant fees, 30% gross margins, and then you would get whatever would come to you as an owner. Well, the Airbnb revolution came in, Vrbo, these other platforms. And now through technology, I can run from my cell phone right over here. There were many days where I was fiddling with the temperature in my hot tub in Orlando. And by the way, I don't live in Florida. I live in South Carolina. And through technology, I was able to take ownership of that process and take all those profits for myself and run a business for myself. So cash flow, in my mind and my experience, and my story is a short-term rental story. Net worth and cash flow. Take those current profits and cash flow for yourself.
Well, you mentioned technology. I was talking to the guy who actually ended up buying the short-term rental business from Joey and I, and he was talking about how AI is helping them in so many different levels. One, from automating the responses, right? Like going into the reviews that he's getting online, to be able to respond in a very quick basis. I know like you can set up all of these automations for people who are asking questions for your property. But once they make a review, that was a very manual, hey, you want to go and respond. Well, he's using AI to help them do that and be able to use AI to actually analyze the guest messages as well and be able to create automations for his like tasks and stuff for his property management team. It's like whenever people may come and rent the property and maybe they're saying, hey, just so you know, the sink was, not draining well in the bathroom. They may have not left that publicly, but they put that privately. Well, now he's using these automations actually to be able to deliver content to the people on the ground to go and work on them. I think it's super cool. Also using ChatGPT to enhance and improve the listings on a regular basis, because the more, I guess, that you're using this, the algorithm is growing in understanding of what your property is and putting it higher on the list. So, man, there's just so much innovation and technology that the people are using the short-term rental space. I'll give one more pro, and this was for us a really easy one, is the ability to, because you have that high ceiling, right, a higher potential for the monthly income on that property, you could also then even find ways to go and rent the property and use rental arbitrage and make the math make sense. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you go and get a lease on a property, rent it for 12 months from someone else, and then when you then turn around and short-term rent it, there's enough meat on the bone because of that ceiling, right? So there's an opportunity for you to not have to put in as much money into the deal just to, be able to furnish it, put up the first month, second month's rent, whatever it is. It provided a cheaper way to trial it out, or for some people to just even get into the deal altogether. All right, let's talk about the cons, because clearly not all of us short-term rent even today, and there's reasons why. So for the person listening who doesn't know, what are some of those cons in your eyes, Ben, that they need to be considered?
Yeah. So do you remember that part when I was talking about my pros? If you've heard my story in the past on this podcast, everything worked out with the done for you model until it didn't. The managing company quit the day before Christmas Eve. This is a couple of years back, but all of a sudden I became the operator of the business that I didn't actually understand. Again, as an investor or an I-type investor, I quickly learned that there were systems that needed to be managed and maintained, and I had no idea how to do that. So one of the short-term rentals I had quickly unraveled because the systems weren't in place. They weren't strong, and I didn't know how to manage them. And another one, however, it limped along for about a year, 18 months, only because the short-term rental host that was put in place by the management company, her and I had a good working relationship. Additionally, for an I person dealing with negative people, Russ, you and I, we are optimistic people. I like to see the best in people, but some folks they're just never going to be happy, man. And that's okay. That's them. But I very much disliked giving into a guess ridiculous expectations, kind of like you were saying with the technology, because at the end of the day, it's a business. And one bad review on this platform, Verbo platform, Airbnb, whatever it could be, it could kill your business and therefore your investment. So all that said, when I became the operator, I was stressed out about this nonstop. Hence, the investor DNA was not a good fit for me.
How about for you, Jonathan? Give me a con.
I'm going to echo Ben a little bit. As much of a people person as I am, sometimes dealing with people can be a little bit strenuous. And really, there's going to be times, I put an average of maybe 30 minutes a week into this, but then there are times where the roof has a leak, the HVAC needs to be replaced, the hot tub, the heater pump needs to be replaced, and you're spending 2, 3, 4 days sometimes, and it's never at a convenient time. The guest always has a problem when you're in the middle of dinner. Now, there's ways to solve this. There's different ways to run short-term rentals. You were just talking about ways that you have an operator in place. I'm talking about the way in which I'm capturing the maximum profit possible. So I'm doing most of the work myself, or not, physically doing the work, but I'm making the connections, making the calls. And so sometimes it's going to interrupt dinner. Sometimes it's going to interrupt family time. 3, maybe 2 Christmases ago, I was ready. I was taking 2 weeks off for Christmas. I had all the stuff planned. I was just going to, drink my coffee, read my newspaper, and chill for a couple of weeks. And, the high paying guests at Christmas time down at my Orlando property, guess what? The pump goes out. The pool is not heated in the middle of winter in Orlando. And so I'm on the phone trying to get people at Christmas. They want to be taken off. So I'm trying to preserve my investment. So the cons are, in my way of doing things, is that there's going to be some inconveniences that come along with running your own business.
There was nothing worse than walking into class when you're in school and the teacher saying, "Pop quiz day." Why? Because you were unprepared. Are you unprepared, though, for financial freedom?
Don't be. Find out how close you are by taking our 30-second quiz at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/quiz.
Tribe, if you're still searching for what is going to be that passive income source that's going to push you over the hump, it's going to help you become financially free, head over to the Art of Passive Income podcast, where our friend Mark Podolsky breaks down his amazing land flipping method.
You've heard us talk about how this one strategy has created over $30,000 a month in passive income for Russ and I. Do yourself a favor, wherever you listen to podcasts, go hit the subscribe button to the Art of Passive Income podcast today.
The benefit of getting all of that high income potential is that it also comes, as you said earlier, hospitality. And I think that that's one of the things that we have to recognize. If this is a business you're going to be in, you're not really in the real estate business. If you own the real estate, then that's a separate thing. It's like McDonald's owning the real estate, but also serving hamburgers, right? Like there's two different companies going on here. And you're doing them both. You got the real estate, it's going to require its own maintenance and upkeep, but then you have to deal with people. And that's definitely a con. I dealt with people for 4 years, Stallion, right out of college, renting cars at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. And I'm just telling you, Ben, you said dealing with negative people. Oh boy. Imagine dealing with somebody whose car that they just bought 5 days ago, brand new, spent $80,000 on it, and then they're taking it into the service shop because it's not working, and you got to go pick them up. I used to deal with negative people all the time. I said, boy, I do not want to be in that business. And the beauty of the short-term rental space is that you can help people who are wanting to travel or who've been displaced because of some reason. But just also, you are dealing with people. Huge negative, huge con in my eyes. How about for you?
All right, you guys have mentioned the people part, and I'm an S, right? An SI on the disc. But for me, the biggest thing about short-term rentals, at least what we experience, is we're not in a traditional vacation rental, short-term rental situation in Birmingham, Alabama. This is not a destination that people are going to year-round for, going to the beach or going to the mountains like Jonathan has mentioned with his 2 properties there. And so what we find is the biggest challenge is municipalities. They have regulations around this that are constantly changing. You can be fine. You can be super profitable in the area that you're at. And then one city council meeting comes up, someone brings up the idea of short-term rentals being a nuisance. And, I heard about this and I don't want these criminals staying next door to me in my neighborhood or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden there's this, kibosh on short-term rentals that you have built a business around. That is a problem. And that's a consideration that, if you're going to get into this, you need to know what the municipalities are saying about this, even current event information, but historical, meetings and things around that. If you don't know that, it can come to bite you. In fact, Russ and I bought a house in an area that did not have any restrictions. And the neighbors got in such an uproar when they found out what it was going to be used for that the city hall, we went and met with the mayor and his whole crony group, and they were complete morons, and they shut us down. I mean, without even having something in writing, we were like, this is not worth it.
They allowed emotion to make decisions for them instead of using logic. There is I do think the cons are municipalities. You got HOAs. You need to understand, so if you're going to go in a non-traditional environment, you might run into potential issues.
Right.
So you maybe don't stretch out of where deals where they are and they're being loved upon. When you venture out into new areas, you may be getting yourself into a problem like we did. All right, let's go to the third thing. I want to talk about some strategies. How do you do this? Ben, talk a little about some strategies and how you can do short-term rentals differently.
Yeah. So with anything, you got to have a strategy. I mean, my whole military service, you don't just go into combat willy-nilly, right? You have a strategy. I think it's really easy to fall in love with this revenue generating idea. However, it just frankly is not right for everyone. And just like we challenge Jonathan Day and I challenge our coaching clients, we got to be honest with ourselves in determining if this is the right fit. Fit is so important. Short-term rentals, specifically the DIY or the DFY, done for you or do it yourself models, they're just not a good fit for my personality type. And trust is critical here. And what do I mean by trust? One tip that if you're thinking about doing this and you're not geolocated with the property you're looking to short-term rent, you need to be aware that you're going to need people to help set up these units, right? So you're going to have people set up and display your furniture, and you really are relying on other people. I went to go check out one of my units, and unbeknownst to me, the setup crew totally messed up the setup of the benches throughout the house. Like, I don't know how you put the wrong legs on a bench, but it happened. And it just blew my mind, guys. Like, so all I'm saying with that one is, it might not be to your standards, especially if you have high standards. And so that's something to be aware of. Lastly, if you're looking for time freedom, just be aware of the DFY or DIY models. Initially, even if you're outsourcing a lot of this stuff, it could still take 5 to 20 hours of your week until you get the systems and processes in place. And so I don't know. I certainly, in my done for you model with the management company, they didn't tell me that I was going to have to still be bought in time wise to it. And so for me, that was a lesson I learned after the fact. So definitely learn the strategies behind it before you commit to it.
Gotcha. Jonathan, how about you? Talk a little strategy for us.
Well, there are several ways that you can go about setting up an Airbnb, a Verbo, whatever, a short-term rental, however you want to phrase that. Of course, we've already talked about getting an operator to run the property for you, purchasing real estate. We've talked about an arbitrage model, getting the lease, and then taking the cream off the top, so to speak. And that can be done you running it or an operator. Whenever you're looking at a new location, of course, it needs to fit into your strategy for taxes. You can have some tax benefits by owning the real estate. That applies to all other forms of real estate as well. But in particular, with a short-term rental, there is some tax. Some people call it a loophole. I don't like the term loophole because it implies that you're doing something wrong. But there's a tax strategy related to being able to use a real estate professional status, an abbreviated real estate professional status, to get active income benefits. So that's potentially a strategy that some people might want to use for wealth generation or keeping more of what they make. On the strategy end of how am I going to go get a short-term rental? Where do I want it to be? You've already mentioned I really like vacation rental markets because places like Pigeon Forge, Tennessee these areas have been renting. People have been renting their houses for generations. The local economy depends on it. There might be some changes in the local rules, but by and large, they're not going to shut down their own economy with these rules. Places like Orlando, Florida, beach markets, other vacation markets. I like that particular strategy because you've got a dependable stream of people coming into the area. And there might be some ebbs and flows based on how the economy is doing and how people want to spend the money. But generally speaking, these are going to be dependable markets. I think one of the best ways to get into short-term rentals, whenever you're thinking about, okay, I might want a property here, you can go to places like AirDNA is a website where you can click around and they'll give you a free trial, I think, for 7 days for one market. And you can click around, maybe 30 days. You can click around and see what properties similar to what you might want to buy are renting for. And you'll be able to run the numbers based on, here's what my mortgage payment will be, here's what my expenses will be, here's how much money I can make. And it can help you get a sense of what's happening. I personally think the best way is the good old-fashioned frenemy method. Go to Airbnb, go to Verbo, start looking at other people's listings as if you were going to rent and start making the chart for yourself. Find out what it's renting for in January, find out what it's renting for in June, and find out what it's renting for in the fall. depending on your market, and you can get a sense of what other people are doing with a similar property. So there's 3 kind of different strategies: for one financial strategy with taxes, one market strategy, and one strategy based on how to choose.
I love that. Stan.
I was just going to bring up just a little tip that I learned in just doing some research myself. Like maybe you're looking at getting a lake house or a beach house. You're like, man, it'd be great to own something down here. We've been coming here for years and I can maybe pay for it through renting it. Well, I'm still waiting on the one that makes sense for my family, because I have such a big family. I have to buy a big house. But the ones that I've looked at, you can use different calculators to go ahead of time. So just kind of like what Jonathan was just saying, doing the research up front, you can have a better idea. BNB Calc is one that I used when I was doing some research around this. And it's really, really helpful because it shows other comparable properties in the area. It shows you what average days a month you can expect to be able to rent a property like this, even if it's never been rented before. So I think that's a really helpful, just hack if you are looking to get into this. And then the second thing is just bring it back to, we're talking about strategy here, bring it back to being realistic about your personality and your time commitment. So everybody's kind of mentioned this a bunch of times. Ben's already said it. But if your time does not allow you to be the actual operator, then you have to spend a lot of time on the front end finding the right operator. Because I'm telling you, if you don't have the right operation in place, this could be a disaster. And so, yeah, take your investor DNA. If you haven't already done that, go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/free call. Talk to one of our coaches, and you can actually get them through that process. They will actually give you an access to the investor DNA to do that.
All right. So as I wrap this up, I think strategy, like options, right? What are my options? If you don't have any options or you don't know what they are, it might not be good for you, right? Like you want as many outs as possible. And I think as I look at the rental market, when you and I were doing it, we got a lot of 1-bedrooms. That was a strategy.
Yep.
Turns out it was a bad strategy to have too many 1-bedrooms, because what do you start competing with? You start competing with hotels. And hotels have way more money than you do, way more marketing capital than you do. They are more known, right? And so it's harder to compete. So I think of strategies like, how many options can I get in here? If I was going to do something that was a 1-bedroom, I may look for like a tree house. I'm going to make it really create a super unique, like glamping. I want to try something that somebody's not going to be looking at my tree house or my yurt out in the middle of somewhere and comparing it to staying in an hotel, because it's a completely different experience. But if I want to get a property in a non-vacation destination, I may be looking to get like a 3, 4, 5-bedroom for the potential to rent it out locally for people who have been replaced or been displaced by a fire. We had that, or a tornado or a flood or something where they needed a place to go, and it become more of a 30-day stay where you have a little more consistency. I like the idea of having the nightly rent, and I want to get as many of those as possible, but being able to use it and go to the places that will actually, there are services out there that your insurance companies partner with that are looking for places to put their insureds whenever they've had these events. I think that that's an option. So to me, the more ways that I could do it, so I would want to be looking for options around the size of property, the type of property, being very unique, but also being diverse enough that I could make it do multiple things. All right. Well, hopefully this is something, was helpful to you if you're considering in 2025 and getting into the short-term rental space, not only the pros, the cons, but some strategies. Give us a like on this episode if this is something that was helpful to you. Tell us in the comments something that you would have seen as a pro or con or strategy that we did touch on that would be helpful to those watching as well. Thank you, coaches. Thank you, Stallion. Have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset. and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.